So first, I want to say thank you for everybody that's participating in this today. I'm just overwhelmed. We got some good speakers, some good topics, and kind of wondering why I was selected to go first and to cover this topic. So just remember, you get what you pay for. And so let's jump on into this thing. Let's see here. Is it going to advance, Dan? Yep.
There you go.
All right, I've been asked to talk about cover crop basics today, and that's what I'm going to try to do. And I guess I was asked to cover this topic because we're working with cover crops a lot in North Florida, and there's a lot of interest in that now for various reasons. I don't know, it seems like we're circling back the way we used to farm years ago, pre-World War I and pre-World War II. If you go back and talk a lot of the older farmers in this area, the dads and granddads of the younger generation we're working with now, they all said they grew some type of cover crop. They grew winter and summer legumes for nitrogen source, or they may have called it a land builder, maybe not thinking about all the benefits we see today out of cover crops. But they grew hairy indigo, crotalaria, velvet beans, cowpeas. In the summer, a lot of times even there was some intercropping going on. They would broadcast hairy indigo or plant velvet beans and corn. They would hand snap the corn, turn the cows in after they were done harvesting the corn, and then the cows would graze the velvet bean and the corn. So I'm not sure what we're doing is new, but we're circling back to that. And then winter legumes, bitter and sweet blue lupin, crimson clover, Dutch white clover, UBAM, white sweet clover. I don't know how many take time to do this. I guess I'm kind of weird, but I like to look in the road ditches and see what's growing in fence rows, and you will see some of these things growing if you're paying attention to them. I didn't know what white sweet clover was until I started paying attention to that, and you can smell it after the county road mowers have come by and mowed it. You can actually, it's got a very unique smell, and sometime I'll smell it and then I'll stop and look, well, there's UBAM white sweet clover growing. So let me see here. I keep getting these pop-ups here and it's blocking my slide. I'm not sure what I need to do about that. The one thing that changed the way we used to farm with cattle and cover crops and everything being integrated in very diverse rotation was the Haber-Bosch process that was developed to create bombs, basically, or explosives. And then after the big wars were over with, they had, they looked at how else can we use this process. And next thing we know, we have cheap anhydrous ammonia. And then that's what kind of changed things from the way we used to farm. It became a lot more convenient to put out nitrogen. Now we have all kind of sources of nitrogen, but it started with anhydrous ammonia. I used to use a whole lot of it in the area here where I farm. As far as the history, I'm sorry, I went too far. These things are delayed, Dan. Can I back up?
Yeah, you should be able to back up. Just hit the arrow.
Hit the arrow?
So, yeah, there you go.
All right, sorry about that. History of cover crops in North Florida and the SUWANNEE Basin where I work. We have very highly weathered, very sandy soils, which are typical of the southeast coastal plain. Ours in the SUWANNEE Basin are very prone to wind erosion in the spring from winter and spring storm fronts. Where I live here in Jefferson County, we have loamy sands, so we have a little different issue. They wash down the hill to the first creek they can find. And so, 5 to 8, 10% slopes, which you see a lot of in the southeast. So we have multiple challenges here with erosion in North Florida. Cereal rye has been one crop that's grown over the years for cover crop and for grazing. And also cereal rye is a good cover crop to plant between vegetable beds, i.e. watermelons in the spring, to cut down on wind erosion. So that one's that one has never left popularity in our area. Hairy and indigo and blue lupin we're planting as land builder. This is what the old folks tell me. There used to be thousands of acres of blue lupin planted in this area, and I think some cold winters and maybe some disease kind of eliminated that. But if, the other thing you notice now is when you go disc up a fallow field, you're going to probably see hairy indigo pop up, very hard seeded, and you don't really want that in peanuts. So we got to be careful about these cover crops and what we're promoting and asking the farmers to plant, that it does not become a problem down the road. Blue lupin was also used for livestock feed as a protein source. Kurt Brock, who's standing here, his daddy or granddaddy planted blue lupin years ago, and they still have some that's been reseeding on the farm for 50 years, and Kurt's been trying to do a seed increase and has some multiple challenges with that, but he does still have some in his barn that they wouldn't get planted this year. All right, slides go. There we go. So, well, sorry about that. I don't know, my internet connection's bad or what. Get back to the slide. I've been working with the SUWANNEE County Conservation District the last 4 years. They were able to come up with some money out of their kitty to start working with cover crops, and we got matched with some money from the Florida Department of Ag Water Policy Office, and also this past year, Stetson University has some funding. And we've been working with 10+ demonstration farms here in North Florida. We're trying to promote the 5 principles of soil health. All of these have been asked to plant multi-species cover crop blends. 50% of the farms that we're working on are grazing them, which I like to see. And we're trying to track changes in organic matter, if any, or soil health over the 5 years. So we're pulling soil health samples every year, sometimes twice a year. We're making other observations as we go, mainly learning what not to do. So far, we haven't had a failure of any kind. So we've learned some things not to do, or things we can do better. We're sending soil samples to Ward Laboratory in Kearney, Nebraska. That's who some folks recommended to do that. So we're staying with them. Now I'm also aware of other places that can do these same tests. So I'm not saying they're the best, but so far they've been good to work with. And so right now we're entering our 4th fall cover crop season. All right, cover crop basics. I guess the thing we all need to keep in our back of our minds, especially for a county agent or a technician with the conservation district or industry, is we encourage farmers to plant cover crops. Do no harm. I mean, that's the thing I've had to, when we first started our project, is we don't want to do something that's going to hurt their cash crop or their livestock or anything like that. So we need to keep that in the back of our minds. Do the cover crops we're asking them to plant or promoting, do they create more nematode problems? Do they become a weed in the next cash crop? Do they promote insect or bad insect problems instead of good insect, beneficial insects? Those are the kind of things we need to keep in our minds. And so we look at what we've already grown and we start there, then maybe things over time and try some new things. And see what works. The other thing I think we really need to focus on is when we plant a cover crop is have a purpose in mind. Why are we planting that cover crop? Or is it a multiple purposes things we're trying to accomplish? Cover crop is one of the tools in the soil health regenerative ag toolbox, something that can help. There's other things like livestock grazing. I think somebody else is going to talk about that, maybe Audrey. Looking forward to that. Keep our soil health principles in mind as we're developing and implementing cover crops on our farms. And then probably this is a big one, is plan, have a good strategy on how we're going to do this. And you will find out pretty quick. And what I've discovered in talking to the farmers and seeing how all of this works is, it's a very difficult. You say, why are farmers not doing this? Because it's not easy. especially when they're trying to harvest a cash crop. But there's some things we're learning we can do and use some other strategies on helping these guys plant cover crops during crop harvest. So the other thing is, what do I have on hand to plant a cover crop with? What do I need? Labor is a big one. Equipment's a big one. What kind of seed do I need? Inoculant, fertilizer, all of these are important. All right, here we go. If we're gonna have a cover crop that's gonna work for us, and I like to say I want to plant a cover crop that's gonna work for us. We got to take care of it, and we got to treat it like a cash crop. And if you talk with other veteran cover croppers, they're going to say the same thing. And I like this here, whether you're planting a cover crop or a cash crop, well sown equals half grown. You can do a good job of planting it. It's going, you've already half grown the crop by taking care of it early on. All right. We talk about the 4 R's of nutrient management. Well, what about the R's of cover cropping? Right species, right varieties, which is very important. Are we planting a variety that's adapted to our area, not one they're growing in the Midwest? Right methods for you. What can you get done? The right time, the right rate. This is a big one for me. I'm trying to adjust my thinking a little bit. We typically think bushels per acre or pounds per acre, but probably we all need to be thinking plants per square foot instead of that, because seed size varies. Talking with a guy this morning about oats, and one oat is bigger than another oat. And so I need to refocus and recalibrate, think about plants per square foot. And, you know, you can get you a hula hoop or a piece of PVC pipe and make you a square, especially if you're broadcasting seed, throw it out there on the ground and see actually how many plants per square foot do you have when you get done, especially broadcasting seed. Lime, fertility, inoculant, if needed, irrigation. If you have access to that, it makes cover crops more dependable. And on this sand that we got, it makes it grazing more dependable. If we're grazing a cover crop, are we going to graze it down where there's not anything left but roots? That's not good. If you're talking to NRCS grazing folks, they're going to say take half, leave half. Well, we can debate that on another day, but you can't just take it down to nothing and expect you to have something there. So we need to think about that. Scout cover crops, just like we would a cash crop. Are you looking for insects, disease, nematodes? All of us ought to have a shovel or digging fork to go look for nematodes, and how well our legumes are nodulating, our rooting depth. What we've discovered when we're planting cover crops and go back and look at how the cover crops perform, we're finding compaction is a big issue, especially when we're no-tilling the cover crops. And it stands to reason when in the Southeast on coastal plain soils, we recommend subsoiling under the row when we plant corn, peanut, soybeans, cotton, grain sorghum, that we're still might have the same issue with cover crops. And we do, at least on the soils here in our area that we work. So we need to think about that. And then, do we plant a single species or a multi-species? And I've got some biases on that. I like multi-species because we're allowed to spread our risk. We've already planted, actually in one case, 2 years ago, planted a blend, a summer grazing blend. And one of the other farmers had planted the blend. My cover crop demo farm planted the same blend. And the first guys didn't come, one of the species didn't come up. So I called my second farmer and said, have you planted yours yet? And he said, no. I said, go to co-op and buy some tiff leaf pre-millet, throw it in there. I said, one of those species is probably not going to come up. Sure enough, it didn't. So we saved it, but the multi-species blends, we hear a lot about that today. Do they complement one another or do they antagonize one another? That's some things we need to think about. In most cases, what I've seen or what I observe, I see complementing one another if we get our seeding rates right. Risk management, we've already talked about that. If one species fails, others to tote the load for what we need in the cover crop. Seeding rates, cover crop probably can get by with less versus grazing. We're going to need more. Just, you know, Just something to think about. Typically, we are almost talking about 50 to 100% more for grazing, depending on whether it's broadcast or drilled precisely. What kind of biomass do we desire? Do we want water erosion control versus wind erosion control? And this is a big one, weed control. I had several farmers told me that they planted a cover crop because they wanted something to keep the soil on the hill and the water on the hill and not in the creek. And a year later, after they planted cover crop and had a good biomass out there, they started figuring out, hey, we got better weed control, especially if they were strip tilling or no tilling and not, basically disking it under. So you got to think about things like that. If you want good weed control, you got to have a good heavy cover crop. How are we going to terminate that cover crop? Why, when, how? That's important. Most farmers see some of the cover crops like Kurt Brock here grows in Monticello's and some of the other ones here. And it says, how do you plant through that? You got to have a plan on how you're going to deal with that. Our biggest problem here in North Florida, if do not have irrigation, is about the 1st to the middle of March. We're going to start getting a little antsy. And we're going to be watching the weather. We're going to be looking at the cover crop. We want the biomass, but we're going to be worried about that cover crop pulling too much moisture out of the ground and not being able to plant our cash crop from the middle of April to the middle of May or into the end of May. And that's an issue every year. So are we going to sacrifice biomass sometime early? Yes, we will. If you go to the Midwest, the cover crop actually helps them remove moisture. They're very wet, their soils are heavy, and they want to leave them as long as they can to pull moisture out of the ground so they can get in the fields actually sometime earlier because they can stand up earlier to plant the cash crop. So those are some things to think about. Cover crop seeding methods. This is one I kind of jump up and down about with folks. Cover crop seeding begins before or during cash crop harvest. You need to have a plan. And one of the challenges I've seen is we don't spread crop residue very evenly. That's kind of an afterthought. And when you use tillage to get rid of it anyway, you're going to till the land a bunch between crop harvest and the next spring cash crop. Generally, that's not always an issue. But if you're going to be trying to broadcast a cover crop, in peanuts, so to speak, which we're doing here now, that peanut vines and the chaff have to be spread evenly. So where I see struggles is on combine spreading vines and chaff, and generally it's the chaff that doesn't get spread. The vines spread very well. Soybean residue, again, the chaff does not get spread evenly. So you got a heavy mat right behind the combine. So this is important. And if you'll see this picture here, Kurt Brock has modified his 6-row KMC combine to spread chaff and vines evenly, using modification of his sprocket speed and actually modification of the back of the machine with steel disc and to put the beaters on the top. And when he walks out of a peanut field, you've got a green carpet. So that's important for him when he's coming back to no-till a cover crop. The other big one I see as a challenge, I've already seen it this year, is if we want a cover crop to suppress palmer, amaranth, or any other weed post-harvest in corn or peanuts, we start digging peanuts here in August, so we have a long time for weeds to grow from August till frost. You got to start clean. If you plant a cover crop in the field with palmer, amaranth already growing, you're already in trouble. So those are the things we need to think about. Consider what resources you have on hand to plant the cover crop. Do you have a disc? Do you have a fertilizer spreader? Do you have a vendor that can do it for you? All of these are important. And as I mentioned earlier, all of this equipment, tractors and labor, generally is tied up in peanut harvest or cotton harvest. Maybe there's an opportunity to have a vendor help you do that, whether it's a farmer's co-op, custom operator, or maybe somebody even with an airplane that can do a good job of spreading cover crop seed for you. Equipment for planting, multitude of equipment we're using in our demo project. Broadcast seeders, fertilizer applicators, plane, helicopter, drone. Somebody says drone, yeah. Somebody's already put out some seed this year with a drone in a duck pond. After spraying the corn and the weeds, sprayed it first with the drone and then came back, seeded a Japanese millet crop in the standing corn. That's a very small niche market, but it can be done. No-till drill, very precise. Some people say it's too slow and more maintenance, but those are what I prefer because they do a very good job and get by with less feed. Probably down here, vertical till units have more interest because they're fast. You can do some field leveling. Fields may be unlevel after a potato harvest or carrot harvest or peanut harvest. You can broadcast seed in front of these. You can mount air seeders on them. Start to see some of those down here, at least one or two. What we're hearing about in other places of the country, not here yet, maybe someday, combines with seeders on them, where they're blowing the seed up under the head of the combine. That's planting cover crops in the fall in the Midwest or Northern Corn Belt has to be done early or they're not going to get the benefits. So they're actually seeding the cover crop with the combine. High boys, seeing a lot of those with air seeders on them now, but they can start planting cover crop before corn or soybean harvest in the Midwest. And then probably a big one we haven't really thought much about is, y'all saw the earlier picture when I first started of Kurt Brock kneeling in a patch of crimson clover. What about cover crop reseeding? There's some opportunity there. Not all cover crops will reseed. Crimson clover usually is a good one. I found also that blue lupin reseeds very readily. But again, keep in mind, if that cover crop is reseeding, is it going to be a detriment to, say, another crop? Maybe you want to plant a winter crop of wheat or rye or something for seed. Is that going to be an issue if it's going to be coming up in that? And this is just some examples of the equipment. Pendulum spreader in the box on the left, down at the bottom, our local vendor here in Jefferson County spreading the seed and fertilizer and peanuts before we dig them. Top right, a vertical till unit made by McFarland. That's a McFarland real disc covering up seed after we broadcast with seed and fertilizer. And then probably the one that's used the most in our area is a disc, probably the least preferred because of what it does to the soil and compaction and leaves the land more vulnerable to erosion. But in this case, Kurt's landlord wanted this peanuts covered up so the doves wouldn't light the field and would go to his dove field. So all these little challenges we run into, we don't think about, but that was not Kurt's preferred method of planting a cover crop. And then some examples of more precise seeders. Air seeder up there on the left, no-tilling rye and corn stalks, sunflower no-till drill after running a vertical till, planting a double crop of iron clay peas behind 230 bushels of corn, just a regular grain drill, planting cover crop grazing blends behind peanuts where we spread the straw with a hay fluffer, actually spread the straw out and put a roller on it to mash the vines in the ground where the grain drill would work without dragging. And then a Truax no-till drill planting a cover crop blend here in Madison County here a couple of weeks ago. And that turned out pretty well. Methods of equipment for termination. Again, we mentioned earlier, what are you going to do with the cover crop the next spring? Traditional equipment has been, are we going to disc it, bottom plow it, rotary tiller on vegetable operations or small farms, or a power harrower. Generally, if we're in some type of conservation tillage system, we're going to be looking at something different from that. Cover crop roller, crimper. I found and others have found a regular cultipacker works good for rolling cover crops. So sometimes you might have something there on the farm you can use already. Do we want to put a spray boom on it where we can actually spray as we roll and crimp? We've got some people doing that now, and very fast, run 8 to 9 and 10 miles an hour, 5 to 10 gallons of water, and kill cover crop. Generally, we have winter weeds sometime in our cover crop that have to be dealt with, so we really need to spray them as we roll them down. If you have a perfect stand of cereal rye or triticale or oats and with no weeds, you make and roll and crimp the cover crop, not need any herbicide, but that has not been our case here at least. tractor or high bore sprayer? How are we going to spray if we are, or put it on the cover crop roller? What about frost? We're planting cover crops now, post harvest. Frost is, you're probably going to use frost to terminate that cover crop. Unless you need to come in and plant some winter grazing, then you may cover crop roll the summer cover crop down and no-till drill a winter grazing in that, or disc it in like sun hemp at this time of year, some disc in sun hemp, and then plant another fall or winter cover crop. And then what about relay cropping or interseeding? Dr. Wright and Ann and Cheryl, they've been no-tilling Bahia grass and winter grazing at Quincy, or at least Mariana, where we have cattle. And the cattle keep grazing the winter grazing, the rye or the oats. And we don't kill that cover crop. They graze it till it's done, and then the Bahia comes up, and then you've got Bahia grass coming. So sometimes they've said they never pulled the cattle off. So that's what we like to see, is much use out of the lands we can. All right, hold on just a minute. All right, here's just some examples of machinery used to terminate cover crops. One on the top left is a 36-foot cover crop roller. Notice the saddle tanks, he can haul a lot of water. Probably could do, if he could get some real big fields, which a lot of his fields are small, he could probably do 200 acres a day, which is moving along. Your main limiting factor is somebody to keep the water shoved to you and keep your tanks full of water and rolling and crimping and spraying all in one pass. Down in the top left, our traditional method of killing the cover crop, if we're strip tilling or no tilling, is spraying. Top right is a Landau vertical till unit incorporating sun hemp. I don't know why I said sunflower. And then in the bottom right, actually, one of our cover crop demo farms is rolling down cereal rye with what I already had on hand is a Case Turbo vertical tillage unit, running very shallow so we can run it without disturbing the soil no more than he has to. Okay. Recap. What do you want to accomplish? You know, what are we, again, why are we planting a cover crop? Are we planting it for wind erosion, water erosion? Are we planting it for maybe nematode control? Are we planting it for weed suppression? Are we planting it, which is very important in our area, to recycle or capture nutrients to keep them from getting into the groundwater or running off the field? So you need to think about that. Or it may be multiple benefits, as we've already talked about. You make a plan and then you work the plan. You know, it's just like all the farming. You make a plan on how you're going to do it. And a lot of times the weather is going to drive that plan on how you're going to do it. Start simple, try on a portion of acres. If you've never planted a cover crop, observe what happens as you gain confidence in it. You know, add more acres, but don't want to plant something and then you get disgusted or frustrated with it and give up. You're going to make mistakes. Everybody else has. So, you know, learn from them and move on. Other thing I suggest is set up on-farm comparisons or demos. You know, plant some with and without, and look at what happens to your cattle. What do they look like? What do the cash crops look like next year? What happens 5 years from now? What's going on in that field? Those are the things you need to be doing. So I say make observations and take notes through the season. What do you observe? Get out there on your hands and knees and look what's going on under the cover crop mulch. You might be surprised. Take more notes while you're harvesting. That's a good time to evaluate what's going on. Do you planted a cover crop? What is your weed pressure at harvest? That's important to look at. Take advantage of those with past cover crop knowledge, whether it be a county agent, conservation district technician, successful cover cropper is very important, or somebody in the industry that's familiar with that. And then last of all, this is probably a big one, take advantage of state, regional, and federal cost share opportunities. They're out there, and I think some more will become available. We're doing a pilot cover crop cost share program this year on 10 farms. We're going to see how that goes, and if it works like I think it's going to work, maybe there's going to be some opportunity for some state cost share here in Florida to do that in the future. Sources of info. I'm going to put in a plug for the Southern Cover Crop Council. Hold on just a minute. Battery's running low. My plug got pulled out. SARE fact sheets. There's a lot of information from SARE, books, managing cover crops properly. I call that the cover crop Bible. If you don't have a copy, get you a copy of that. Southern Forages, I think it's on its 5th edition. If you're grazing cover crops, goat, sheep, cattle, dairy cattle, interested in wildlife, that's a very good book with pictures. I need pictures. Your land grant college publications, for sure. What works in your area. If you want to get on a website and get addicted to making blends, Green Cover Seed has a smart mix calculator. You can get on there and actually create a cover crop blend that gives you the pounds per acre and the price. You might want to log on there and play with that a little bit. Field days, take advantage of those. During COVID, of course, now everything's virtual. Maybe we'll get through this someday. And then there's piles of YouTube videos out there where people, it's almost you can sit and watch them all day and all night if you got time to do that. And for those of y'all don't know this suspect character standing here, this is Dr. David Wright, standing in the grazing mix in SUWANNEE County. And Dr. Wright, you know, he's got a dry sense of humor. He said a good agronomist always draws a crowd. So look at what's standing behind him.